It was the roar of hunger that haunted her more than the biting wind. "My village will not die like this," Anya murmured, her lips cracked by the extreme cold as the ground trembled. Before her, not one, but 2 0.00-pound buffaloes each, mountains of muscle and fury, their eyes bloodshot, an impossible challenge in the icy vastness of Yakutia. The meat of these giants was the only salvation, but the price. The price could be her own life in that instant when the monsters charged, and she knew that the fate of everyone rested on her trembling arrow. Anya's arrow trembled, not from fear, but from the tension that stretched time. The 2 buffaloes, mountains of fury, advanced, the frozen ground vibrating under their hooves. The icy air cut her face, but the young Yakut woman felt a strange warmth, a flame ignited by urgency and love for her people. She could not fail. Her eyes, accustomed to the white vastness, focused on the red eyes of the beasts. With a hoarse cry, Anya did not shoot. She threw herself to the side, rolling in the deep snow at the gorge's entrance. The first buffalo passed like a runaway train, its massive horns scraping inches from her head, kicking up snow and ice. The second, behind it, tried to change direction, but speed and slippery terrain made it stumble. Anya rose with the agility of a lynx, bow taut. It was not an arrow to kill, but to guide. She aimed precisely at the hind leg of the stumbling buffalo to irritate and unbalance it. The arrow embedded itself superficially, and the beast let out a roar of pain and rage, turning awkwardly. It was exactly what Anya wanted. The narrow gorge had rocky, uneven walls covered in treacherous ice. Anya had spent days studying every crack, ledge, and weak point. She knew the path like the back of her hand. She ran into the gorge, her feet finding purchase where others would slip, her lungs burning in the thin air. The buffaloes, blinded by fury, followed her. For them, a headlong rush. For Anya, a calculated dance. She was leading them. At each turn, each narrowing, the colossal beasts slowed, scraping their flanks against the sharp rocks, losing momentum. Anya knew that their brute force was their greatest weakness in that icy labyrinth. In the village, the smoke from the few fires was a reminder of dwindling hope. Elders and children huddled in their tents, stomachs empty, eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for a miracle. Anya's grandmother, a woman of wisdom and deep wrinkles, felt the weight of the weight. She knew Anya was brave, but the challenge was superhuman. "May the spirits of the tundra guide her," she murmured, her lips frozen in prayer. Back in the gorge, Anya reached a point where the path narrowed even further, a rocky throat perfect for her strategy. She stopped, turning to face the buffaloes, which approached with difficulty, one behind the other. Their eyes, full of rage, showed increasing confusion. The first buffalo, the largest, tried to force its way through but became wedged between the ice and rock walls. Its hooves slipped and it roared, desperate. The second, behind it, pushed, adding to the chaos. Anya raised her bow, heart pounding, mind clear as ice crystal. It was not strength but cunning. The trap was set. She needed one more push, one last move to seal the fate of those giants and her village. The air was charged with tension, the smell of sweat and fear mingling with the biting cold. Everyone's life depended on that moment, on that decisive step. Anya knew this was the point of no return. With a swift, calculated movement, she pulled a small leather pouch from her belt, scattering its contents, a mixture of sharp stones and coarse sand, onto the slippery ice directly in front of the first buffalo. The animal, already unbalanced and furious, tried to take another step, but its giant hooves completely lost their grip. With a guttural roar, the beast stumbled violently, its front legs giving way under its colossal weight. It fell sideways, its massive body hitting the rock with a dull thud that made the gorge tremble. The ice cracked beneath it, and a deep groan escaped, more of frustration than pain. The second buffalo, propelled by the first, tried to back away, but the narrowness of the path and its fallen companion's body prevented it. It pushed, kicked, but only managed to entangle itself further. Anya watched, her heart beating like a shaman's drum. Her own muscles burned, but her mind was sharp. There was no time for rest. With the first buffalo immobilized and the second trapped behind it, the most dangerous part of the hunt was over. But the work was far from finished. The task of dragging those giants back to the village seemed almost as impossible as bringing them down. In the village, Anya's grandmother, Nuna, sat by the dwindling fire, her eyes fixed on the gorge's entrance. Her face, marked by years of harsh winters, reflected a mix of anxiety and unwavering faith. She held a small, polished bone amulet, an inheritance from generations of YAKUT hunters, feeling the faint warmth emanating from it. "The spirits of the tundra are wise, my granddaughter," she murmured to herself, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air of the tent, an almost inaudible prayer. Other women in the village, with their own hungry children nestled near them, exchanged worried glances, a heavy silence filling the air. Hope was a thin thread, but Anya's courage was the anchor that kept them from sinking into despair. Back in the gorge, Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. The first buffalo, exhausted, lay panting, its eyes still full of fury, but its body was trapped and unable to rise. The second, after several minutes of futile struggle, also began to show signs of exhaustion, its charges becoming slower and less potent. Anya knew that hypothermia and fatigue would do the rest of the work. She needed to act fast, before the ice gave way completely, or the animals regained their strength. With renewed vigor, Anya began to untie the ropes she carried, coiled over her shoulder. They were strong, made of braided reindeer hide, prepared for this exact eventuality. Heavy and icy in her hands, she would need all her strength and intelligence to tie the buffaloes securely, preventing them from breaking free or injuring themselves. Each knot was a thought, each pull a silent prayer. Her fingers, numb and reddened by the cold, worked with instinctive precision, guided by ancestral wisdom. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of grey and purple. Anya knew that night would bring an even more intense cold, an invisible enemy. It was a race against time, against the relentless nature of YAKUTIA, and against the exhaustion that weighed on her shoulders. But the thought of her village, of Nuna and the children, was a fire that kept her moving, a warmth that propelled her through the paralyzing cold. She was not just hunting, she was weaving the future of her people with every fiber of her being, every beat of her heart, every breath she took. The promise of a more abundant and secure tomorrow was the force that drove her. Anya, with aching muscles and heavy breathing, finished tying the second buffalo. The reindeer hide ropes, firm and well tied, ensured that the giants would not break free. The sun had already set, and the darkness of night began to swallow the gorge, bringing with it an even more biting cold. The challenge of bringing down the beasts had been immense, but now, facing the colossal bodies, Anya understood that the real battle was just beginning. How to move two mountains of flesh and bone, each weighing 11,000 pounds, back to the hungry village. Her fingers, almost numb, fumbled over the icy rock. She needed a plan, and fast. The wisdom of her ancestors, whispered in legends and teachings passed down from generation to generation, was her only guide. She remembered how ancient hunters used nature itself to their advantage. The ice, their constant enemy, could be their ally. With monumental effort, Anya began to scrape and smooth the ice around the first buffalo, creating a more slippery surface, almost a natural ramp that would gently descend through the gorge. Each scrape of her bone axe on the frozen surface was an act of faith, an echo of the generations that preceded her. She visualized the path, imagined the weight sliding, each movement planned with the precision of one who knows the land. In the village, Nuna, Anya's grandmother, felt the agony of waiting weigh on her chest. The children, with pale faces and wide, hungry eyes, were already sleeping huddled together, perhaps dreaming of the warmth of a larger fire and the smell of roasted meat. Nuna got up, her knees creaking, and went to the tent entrance. The wind howled, bringing with it the smell of snow and the promise of an even colder night. She looked at the starry sky, where the lights of the aurora borealis danced in greenish and purple hues, a spectacle of cruel beauty. "Anya, my brave one," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion, "may the spirits of ice and earth give you the strength to bring life back to our people." Her heart ached, but a flame of pride for her granddaughter burned strong, warming her from within. Back in the gorge, Anya worked tirelessly. The ropes, now tied with complex knots, formed an improvised harness around the fallen buffalo. She would use the natural slope of the terrain, the smooth ice, and the force of gravity to slide the first giant. It was a slow and exhausting process. Each small movement required superhuman effort, her muscles screaming in protest. Sweat froze on her forehead, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But the image of the hungry faces of her village, especially Nuna's and the children's, was a balm for her pain. She pulled the ropes, bracing her feet on the ice, her slender body against the colossal mass of the animal. Her shoulders ached, her hands were raw beneath her hide gloves. She pulled, pushed, used her own body weight to guide the buffalo slowly. The animal, still alive but stunned and trapped, occasionally groaned, a hoarse sound that echoed off the gorge walls, a lament that mingled with the howling wind. Anya spoke to it in whispers, words of respect and necessity, as if it could understand the urgency of her mission. "It's not out of malice, Great Spirit," she said, her voice hoarse from the cold and effort, "but so that my people may live. Your strength will be our salvation." She felt the ancestral connection, the link between hunter and hunted, life and death, in an eternal cycle. With every meter gained, a new wave of hope invaded her. The cold was a constant reminder of life's fragility, but also of the resilience of the human spirit. Anya was not just a hunter. She was the personification of hope, of the unwavering determination of a people who refused to succumb. She knew she would need all night, and perhaps the next day, to move the two buffaloes out of the gorge and begin the long journey back. But the vision of a future where hunger would no longer be a ghost, where the village fires would burn stronger and the children's laughter would echo again, was the promise that propelled her, warming her spirit against the paralyzing cold. With one last pull, the first buffalo slid a little further, a sign that her method was working. The night was long, but Anya was ready to face it one step at a time for her people. Anya felt her body tremble, not only from the intensifying cold, but from exhaustion. The buffalo, a colossus, moved with agonizing slowness, scraping the ice with a guttural sound. She adjusted her body, seeking firm support, pulling the main rope of the harness. Every fiber of her being was focused, her eyes fixed on the path ahead, where the night's darkness seemed to deepen, swallowing the few visible stars. In the village, Nuna felt a chill, a premonition that made her clutch her amulet. The fires, once warm, were now dying embers, unable to combat the cold. The silence was heavy, broken by the distant howl of the wind and the occasional moans of hungry children. Nuna knew that the night was Anya's greatest enemy, not only because of the cold, but because of the darkness that concealed dangers. She knelt, wrinkled hands clasped, whispering an ancient prayer, asking the spirits to protect her granddaughter and guide her steps. Back in the gorge, Anya heard a dry, startling crack. The sound echoed, making her heart leap. She looked back, eyes wide, and saw the main rope which bore most of the buffalo's weight begin to fray dangerously. One of the reindeer hide braids had given way, and the remaining fibers stretched under immense tension, threatening to snap. An icy despair washed over her. If the rope broke, the buffalo could slide back, or worse, tumble uncontrollably, blocking the path. all her effort would be in vain. Anya closed her eyes for an instant, feeling frustration and fear, but the image of her village's faces, the hopeful eyes of the children, shone in her mind like a flame in the darkness. She could not give up. The ancestral wisdom, which Nuna had always taught her, was not just about hunting, but about adaptation and resilience. She opened her eyes, her mind working feverishly, seeking a solution. Her eyes scanned the gorge, looking for anything that could help her. She remembered an ancient technique, used by hunters when ropes broke during big hunts. It was risky and required a strength and precision she barely possessed. But there was no other choice. With quick, decisive movements, Anya released the fraying rope, knowing she had only seconds before the buffalo began to slide backward. She ran to the side of the animal, where the secondary ropes were still firm, and began to untie one of them with agile fingers, transforming it into a loop. With her heart pounding, she threw the loop over one of the buffalo's massive horns, pulling it with all the strength she had left. The secondary rope, thinner but strong, bit into the horn, offering a new point of support. It wasn't ideal, but enough to hold the buffalo in place, preventing it from retreating. Her muscles screamed, and a groan escaped her lips, but she managed. The buffalo stopped sliding, precariously stabilized. Anya took a deep breath, relief mixed with new urgency. She would need to reinforce the lashing and find a way to continue, now with one less rope and an even greater risk. The turning point had arrived, and with it, proof that her journey was far from predictable. With the buffalo temporarily secure, Anya assessed the damage. The main rope was unusable, its fibers frayed like frozen spider webs. She felt the intense cold of the rock under her hands, the fatigue weighing on every joint. Her eyes, accustomed to the dim light, searched for something, anything that could serve. She saw some sharp stones, but they wouldn't be safe. Then, her eyes fell on a twisted piece of wood, almost a branch wedged between the rocks. It was strong and thick, weathered by time and wind, but it seemed firm. An idea sparked in her mind, an echo of Nuna's stories about ancient hunters who made use of everything the tundra offered. With her bone axe, Anya worked to free the branch, which was embedded in the ice. Each blow was a challenge, but the wood finally gave way with a dry crack. She carried it back to the buffalo, her body bent under the effort. The plan was to use the branch as a lever, a fulcrum to redistribute the weight and relieve tension on the remaining ropes. It was an improvised solution, but the only one she had. She wedged one end of the branch under the rope attached to the horn, and the other end against a solid rock. With a careful pull, she managed to create tension that further stabilized the animal. Her fingers, almost frozen, worked with the precision of a craftsman, adjusting every detail. In the village, Nuna couldn't sleep. The cold seemed to penetrate her bones, and worry for Anya was a heavy burden. She sat near the embers, watching the sleeping children, their thin faces illuminated by the faint light. The night's silence was broken only by the crackling of ice and the distant howl of the wind. Nuna felt a pang of pain in her chest, a mixture of fear and pride. She knew Anya was fighting not only against the buffaloes, but against nature itself, against the hunger that threatened her people. She took a small piece of dried meat, the last remaining, and placed it near the fire, warming it for Anya, a small offering of hope. Back in the gorge, Anya, with the new lever in place, felt a thread of hope. The buffalo, though still a mountain of meat, seemed a little more manageable. She began to pull again, using her whole body, her feet firmly planted on the ice. Progress was slow, painful, but constant. Every inch was a victory, a step towards her village's salvation. The cold cut her skin, but the determination in her eyes was a fire that refused to be extinguished. She was not just moving a buffalo, she was dragging hope for her people, an act of love and sacrifice that would echo for generations. The night was relentless, but Anya, the young YAKUT woman, was even more so. The icy wind whipped her face, turning tears of sweat into tiny ice needles. Her lungs burned with each breath, and exhaustion threatened to buckle her knees. But Anya did not yield. Every muscle in her body ached, but her mind was clear, focused on the image of the village children, their small, pale faces and hungry eyes. It was for them, for Nuna, for everyone who depended on her, that she continued. The improvised branch, though useful, required constant effort to maintain the buffalo's balance, and with each pull she felt the wood creak, a reminder of the fragility of her solution. The ice under her feet, once an ally, now became slippery and treacherous in places, requiring extra caution. She needed more support, something that would give her an advantage against the colossal weight of the animal. In the village, Nuna, sitting by the almost extinguished embers, felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just the cold that invaded her, but a sense that Anya was facing a new challenge. She clutched the mammoth bone amulet in her wrinkled hands, her eyes fixed on the tent entrance, as if she could see through the darkness of the night and the gorge. The silence was oppressive, and every howl of the wind seemed to carry a lament. Nuna stood up, the pain in her knees ignored, and went to the pot of frozen water, scraping off some ice to moisten her dry lips. She knew that faith was the only thing she could offer now, and that faith was unwavering. "May the strength of bears and the cunning of foxes be with you, my granddaughter," she whispered to the wind, her voice laden with stubborn hope. Back in the gorge, Anya realized that the terrain's incline was changing. The path, which had been a gentle descent, now presented a small rise, a natural obstacle that made sliding the buffalo almost impossible. The animal stopped, its immense weight stuck in the ice, and Anya felt an icy discouragement invade her heart. It was as if the mountain was refusing to yield. She pulled with all her might, but the buffalo didn't move an inch. Frustration threatened to overwhelm her, and for a brief moment, the idea that it was an impossible task, that she had failed, crossed her mind. Her shoulders slumped, and she leaned her forehead against the animal's icy flank, closing her eyes. But then, the image of Nuna's hungry eyes, her grandmother's silent hope, shone in her mind. Anya shook her head, pushing away despair. There was no time for weakness. She opened her eyes, her mind again working feverishly. If the terrain wouldn't help, she would have to create her own path. She remembered Nuna talking about how ancient hunters, when facing insurmountable barriers, used what they had: ice and snow. With her bone axe, Anya began to dig into the snow and ice in front of the buffalo, creating an inverted ramp, a depression that would allow the animal to slide down before climbing the small rise. It was arduous work, each blow of the axe requiring strength she barely possessed. The ice was hard as stone, and snowflakes flew, blinding her momentarily. Her fingers, already raw, ached unbearably, but she continued. The sound of the axe hitting the ice echoed in the silence of the gorge, a constant rhythm of determination. She was not just digging a path, she was sculpting hope, inch by inch, with the strength of her will. With each shovel of ice removed, the improvised ramp took shape. It was slow and meticulous work, but Anya knew that every effort would be worth it. She visualized the buffalo sliding smoothly, overcoming the obstacle. The cold seemed to intensify, but the warmth of her determination kept her moving, a beacon of resilience in the darkness of the YAKUTIan night. She looked up at the sky, where the stars twinkled like small watchful eyes, and felt a deep connection to the earth and her ancestors. The battle was not just physical, it was a test of spirit. Anya finished the ramp, her arms and legs trembling from exhaustion. The bone axe felt heavy in her numb hands. She knelt, her breath forming dense clouds in the icy air, and touched the ice. The ramp would offer the descent before the rise, a trick of nature recreated by her strength. Her eyes, red, stared at the buffalo, which seemed even larger and more immobile. Moving it seemed impossible, but Anya had already defied the impossible. In the village, Nuna felt time drag. Sleep wouldn't come, the night's silence filled with the whispers of the wind and anxiety. She got up, her body aching, and went to the tent entrance. The aurora borealis had faded. Nuna imagined Anya fighting against the cold and the colossal weight. Her heart ached, and she placed her hand on her chest, where the mammoth bone amulet pulsed with hope. "The spirits are with you, my Anya," she murmured. Back in the gorge, Anya positioned herself. With the improvised branch still serving as support, she began to pull and push the buffalo, using her body weight and the ramp's incline. It was a brutal ballet of strength and strategy. Her feet sought purchase on the ice, slipping and firming. Each movement was a precise calculation to prevent the animal from toppling. The buffalo, with its 11,000 pounds, began to yield, scraping the ice with a sound that seemed like the mountain's lament. Anya felt her muscles burn, and cold sweat ran down her forehead, freezing instantly. She pulled the ropes with raw hands, her knuckles white. The buffalo descended the small depression of the ramp, and Anya felt a momentary relief. But the climb that followed was even more challenging. She needed more strength. She remembered Nuna teaching her about the strength of community, about how hunters united to move heavy loads. But she was alone. Her eyes swept the gorge, looking for something that could give her an advantage. Then she saw a natural crevice in the rock, slightly above the rise, that could serve as a fulcrum. It was a risk, requiring her to move quickly and tie the rope at a difficult angle. But it was the only chance. With a pounding heart, Anya ran, uncoiling one of the secondary ropes. She threw it with precision, and the rope caught in the crevice. With a firm pull, she tested the lashing, which proved secure. Now, with the rope taut, she had a new leverage point to pull the buffalo. Anya returned to the buffalo, took a deep breath, and began to pull the rope attached to the crevice, while pushing the animal with the branch. It was a combined effort, a desperate dance against gravity and weight. Her teeth were clenched, and a grunt escaped her lips. The buffalo, with a deep groan, began to climb the rise inch by inch. The ice groaned under the weight. Anya felt her own bones might break, but she didn't stop. The image of her village was a fire in her chest, warming her against the cold and exhaustion. She was overcoming the impossible, one pull at a time. The night was still long, but hope, driven by her will, began to shine brighter in the icy gorge. Anya felt the frozen air tear at her throat with each gasping breath. The buffalo, with monumental effort, overcame the small rise, its hooves scraping the ice in a silent victory. But the victory was ephemeral. The terrain transformed into treacherous undulations and crevices hidden under freshly fallen snow. The animal's weight seemed to multiply, and the rope in the crevice, though useful, began to give way, its fibers snapping. Anya needed a new strategy, and fast. Her eyes, burning with fatigue, scanned the gorge for support, but the darkness and rocks offered few options. A cold despair threatened to engulf her, but she pushed it away with the same ferocity as the cold. In the village, Nuna, with a heavy heart, watched the sky. The stars seemed to have hidden, and an icy mist descended, promising a greater drop in temperature. The embers in the center of the tent barely warmed, and the children, even in sleep, huddled closer, seeking warmth. Nuna knew time was running out. She rose, her aged legs protesting, and went to the tent entrance. She peered into the relentless darkness. The wind howled, bringing the smell of snow and the promise of more cold. Warm tears streamed down her wrinkles, not of sadness, but of deep anguish and love for her granddaughter. She imagined Anya, alone, fighting against nature, and a silent prayer, more lament than plea, escaped her lips. "Come back to us, my ice flower," she whispered, her voice choked. Back in the gorge, Anya felt the improvised branch slip in her numb hands. The rope in the crevice snapped with a dry crack, and the buffalo threatened to slide backward. With a cry of frustration and pure willpower, Anya threw herself against its flank, using her own body as a buffer. The impact left her breathless, but the buffalo stopped. Her muscles screamed, and she felt a sharp pang in her shoulder. She needed something more, something that could secure the animal so she could catch her breath and think. Her eyes fell on loose stones and ice at the base of the rock. A dangerous idea, but perhaps the only one, began to form. She grabbed her bone axe and, with quick, desperate movements, began to dig a small hole in the ice near the buffalo's hoof. The goal: to create a trench, a support that would prevent backward movement. Each blow was a challenge, and the hard ice seemed to mock her. Her fingers were raw, and the cold penetrated to her bones. The image of the hungry faces of the village, the silent cries of the children, was a whip to her soul, driving her on. She could not fail. The trench took shape, shallow, but enough to fit one of the hooves. With a final effort, she pushed the animal, and its left front hoof precariously wedged in. The buffalo was, for now, secure. Anya fell to her knees, gasping, her body trembling. Exhaustion was a heavy cloak, but the determination in her eyes still burned strong, an inextinguishable fire in the icy darkness of YAKUTIA. One buffalo was almost out of the gorge, but the second, equally colossal, still waited. The sun would soon rise, bringing either hope or desolation. Anya looked up at the sky, where the first shades of grey began to blend with the dark blue, announcing the arrival of a new dawn. The wind, once howling, now whispered ancient secrets, and she felt the presence of her ancestors, the strength of her people guiding her. She rose, staggering, and looked at the second buffalo, still immobile. The task seemed impossible, but Anya had proven that impossible was just a word for those who did not know the true strength of the human spirit. She took a deep breath, feeling the icy air fill her lungs, and a new surge of courage invaded her. It was time to face the second giant. Anya rose, staggering, and looked at the second buffalo, still immobile. The task seemed impossible, but Anya had proven that impossible was just a word for those who did not know the true strength of the human spirit. She took a deep breath, feeling the icy air fill her lungs, and a new surge of courage invaded her. It was time to face the second giant. The first, trapped in the improvised trench, was a promise of life. But the second was the guarantee, the abundance the village needed to survive the harshest months. The sun, now a thin line of golden light on the horizon, began to paint the sky in pale shades of pink and orange, revealing the icy vastness of the gorge. The landscape, once shrouded in menacing shadows, now showed every crack, every ice-covered rock, every obstacle Anya would have to overcome. The second buffalo lay in an even more precarious position than the first, its hind legs almost dangling over a small depression, a true abyss of ice that could swallow it if not moved with extreme care. Anya felt a chill run down her spine, not only from the relentless cold that was still biting, but from the magnitude of the challenge. Her muscles ached, her tendons felt like threads stretched to their limit, but she could not afford to hesitate. The image of Nuna, her eyes full of silent hope, and the thin faces of the children, was a balm for her pain, an injection of strength into her exhausted veins. She approached the second buffalo, her steps slow and calculated. The animal, an 11,000-pound colossus, exhaled an icy vapor, and its eyes, though lifeless, seemed to watch her with an ancestral muteness. Anya needed a new strategy, something that would not require the same brute force that had left her on the verge of collapse. Her eyes swept the gorge, seeking inspiration. The first buffalo, now a reference point, was a considerable distance away. She didn't have enough ropes to tie both and pull simultaneously. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a rocky ledge, slightly higher and sturdier than the previous ones, that jutted out from the gorge wall, forming a kind of natural hook. It was a risk, but it could be the key. With an audacious plan in mind, Anya ran to the first buffalo, carefully untying one of the secondary ropes that still held it. The animal moved slightly, and she had to act quickly to avoid destabilizing it. With the rope in hand, she returned to the second buffalo, her movements now more agile, driven by urgency. In the village, Nuna felt the first rays of the sun touch her wrinkled skin. The warmth, still faint, was a promise of life. She rose, her eyes fixed in the direction of the gorge, where the light began to dissipate the darkness. A mixture of hope and deep anguish tightened her chest. She knew Anya was fighting against time, against nature, against herself. The children began to wake, their moans of hunger filling the air. Nuna knelt again, her hands clasped, her lips moving in a silent prayer, asking the ancestral spirits to guide her granddaughter and give her the strength for the final effort. Back in the gorge, Enya threw the rope over the rocky ledge, testing its resistance. It seemed firm. With her heart pounding, she tied one end of the rope to the second buffalo's horn, and the other end she wrapped around her own body, passing it under her arms and around her waist. It was a dangerous technique, one that made her part of the lashing, but allowed her to use her own body weight as a counterbalance and lever. With a guttural cry that tore through the morning silence, Anya threw herself backward, using all her weight and the residual strength of her muscles. The rope stretched, and the buffalo, with a deep groan, began to slide slowly out of the depression. Every inch was a battle, every pull an agony. Her feet slipped on the ice, and she felt the rope cut into her skin. But Anya did not stop. The image of her village, the promise of life, was a fire in her chest, warming her against the cold and pain. She was at the climax of her journey, and victory was within her grasp. The second giant, little by little, yielded to her indomitable will. With one last, desperate pull that tore at her muscles and momentarily blurred her vision, Anya felt the second buffalo yield. It slid out of the depression, scraping the ice with a guttural sound, and finally rested on more stable ground. The young YAKUT woman fell to her knees, gasping, the icy air burning her lungs. Her entire body trembled, every muscle fiber in agony, but a silent cry of victory echoed in her chest. She had overcome the impossible once again. With her hands still raw, Anya untied the rope from her body and, with the little strength she had left, tied the second buffalo to a sturdy rock nearby, the same one she had used for the first. It was a temporary lashing, but enough to keep it secure while she caught her breath. The sun now fully showed itself on the horizon, painting the gorge with a pale gold that revealed the vastness and cruel beauty of YAKUTIA. The light, once a mere thread of hope, was now a beacon, illuminating the way back home. Anya looked at the two giants, now side by side, mountains of meat and promise. The immediate challenge of moving them out of the gorge still loomed over her. Her eyes, burning with fatigue, scanned the terrain. The way back was a gradual ascent, but with the weight of the two animals, it seemed insurmountable. But then, an idea, whispered by the winds of ancestral wisdom, ignited in her mind. Nuna always spoke of how nature, however relentless, also offered its own solutions. In the village, Nuna, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, rose with a strange lightness in her heart. The anguish of the night had given way to a serene calm, a premonition that the worst had passed. She stepped out of the tent, her eyes fixed in the direction of the gorge. The air was clearer, and the morning silence was broken only by the distant cries of the children, now more a lament of hunger than of despair. Suddenly, Nuna saw a dark spot, then another, moving slowly on the horizon. She clutched the mammoth bone amulet in her hands, tears streaming down her wrinkles, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. It was Anya, it was hope. Back in the gorge, Anya, with her bone axe, began to work. She couldn't pull the buffaloes up, but she could make them slide. With precise movements, she began to smooth the ice in front of the animals, creating a natural ramp, a slippery surface that gravity would help move. She untied the first buffalo from the trench, and with the improvised branch, which now served as a rudder, began to guide it. It was a brutal ballet of strength and intelligence. The buffalo slid, slowly but steadily, down the ice ramp Anya had sculpted. Every inch was a victory, a step towards salvation. With the first buffalo moving, Anya returned to the second. The process was repeated, the young Yakut woman using every ounce of her strength and cunning to guide the colossus out of the gorge. Her feet slipped, her body ached, but the image of the village, now visible in the distance, was a beacon that propelled her. She saw Nuna, a small figure at the tent entrance, and felt a deep connection, an ancestral force that linked her to her grandmother, to her people, to the very earth. The two buffaloes, now free from the gorge's traps, began their slow and majestic journey back home, dragged by the indomitable will of a young Yakut woman who had defied fate. Hunger would be vanquished. Hunger would be vanquished. Anya felt each step like a stab in her exhausted muscles, but the sight of the village, growing clearer on the horizon, was a balm for her pain. The morning sun, now higher, bathed the tundra in a golden glow, transforming the ice into a shimmering sea of diamonds. The two buffaloes, dragged by her unbreakable will, seemed like walking mountains, each a monumental trophy of her courage. Her feet, once firm, now barely shuffled, but she did not stop. The image of Nuna, standing at the tent entrance, her arms raised in a gesture of gratitude and relief, gave her one last push. When Anya finally reached the village limits, a reverent silence fell upon everyone. The children, who had cried from hunger before, now watched with wide eyes, not understanding the magnitude of what they saw. The elders, their faces marked by time and worry, emerged from their tents, their expressions of despair transformed into silent awe. Nuna ran towards her, her steps uncertain with age, but the strength of her love propelled her. She embraced Anya with an intensity that seemed to want to fuse their bodies, warm tears streaming down her wrinkled face, wetting her granddaughter's fur hood. "My ice flower," Nuna whispered, her voice choked. "You saved us. You saved us all." Anya felt the warmth of her grandmother's embrace, the familiar scent of smoke and dried herbs, and for the first time in days allowed herself to relax. The weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders, and she collapsed into Nuna's arms, not from weakness, but from a deep and overwhelming relief. The other villagers approached, not with noisy euphoria, but with silent, respectful gratitude. Their gazes, once empty, now shone with renewed hope. They touched the icy flanks of the buffaloes, feeling the promise of life that those giants represented. The younger men, their eyes full of admiration, began to help Anya untie the buffaloes and prepare them for butchering. The women, with new vigor, lit the fires and prepared the utensils. The village, which had seemed moribund hours before, now buzzed with renewed energy, a common purpose. The buffalo meat would be enough to feed everyone for months, warding off the specter of hunger and allowing the Yakut people to face the relentless winter with new strength. Anya, sitting beside Nuna, watched the activity. Her fingers still ached, her body was exhausted, but her heart was light. She had faced the impossible, not for personal glory, but for the survival of her people. The justice of her cause, the altruism of her journey had been rewarded. She looked up at the vast blue sky of YAKUTIA, feeling a deep connection to her ancestors, to the land, to every member of her community. Her silent courage had transformed into a living legend, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Nuna held Anya's hand, squeezing it gently. "You are proof, my dear, that true strength lies not just in muscles, but in a heart that refuses to give up." Anya smiled, a tired smile, but full of deep peace. The village would be saved. Hope had returned, and she, the young Yakut woman of silent courage, had forged her own legend, not with words, but with a deed that would echo through generations, inspiring everyone never to lose faith, even in the most extreme conditions. The winter was still long, but now they had the strength to face it, together, and hope. The winter was still long, but now they had the strength to face it, together, and hope. The village, once plunged into a heavy silence of despair, now echoed with the sounds of life. The crunch of the men's bone axes, cutting into the colossal buffalo meat, mingled with the muffled laughter of the children who, though still hungry, felt the promise in the air. The women, with renewed vigor, lit larger fires, the smell of smoke and animal fat beginning to fill the icy air, a long-forgotten aroma. Anya, after Nuna's embrace, was led to her grandmother's tent. Her muscles screamed, but the warmth of the fire and the herbal tea Nuna offered her were a balm. Nuna massaged her raw hands with an ointment of reindeer fat and herbs, her eyes full of a tenderness Anya rarely saw. "Rest, my flower," Nuna whispered. "You did what no man dared. Your spirit is stronger than ice." Anya merely nodded, too exhausted to speak, but feeling the truth in her grandmother's words. Hours later, as the sun already slanted westward, the first piece of fresh meat was roasted. It was not a feast, but the first substantial meal in weeks. The taste, simple and pure, was a celebration. The villagers gathered around the fires, sharing the meat with an almost sacred reverence. Everyone's eyes, once empty, now shone with a new light, a flame that Anya had rekindled. The children, their cheeks flushed with warmth and food, looked at Anya with silent admiration, as if she were a figure from an ancient tale. Nuna, sitting beside Anya, watched the scene. She saw not only the food, but the restoration of dignity, the reconnection of the bonds that hunger had threatened to break. The elders told stories of past hunts, but now Anya's story joined them, a new legend being born under the Yakutian sky. The young Yakut woman, with her silent courage, had become the pulsating heart of the village. In the days that followed, life in the village transformed. The buffalo meat was carefully stored, ensuring survival for many months. The men, inspired by Anya's feat, went out to hunt with a new purpose, and the women, with busy hands and full hearts, wove and sewed with renewed vigor. Human connection, once fragile, flourished again, stronger than ever. The children, fed and warm, played with a joy that seemed to defy the relentless cold. Anya, though still recovering, felt the weight of responsibility transformed into a warmth in her chest. She was no longer just the young Yakut woman. She was the guardian of hope, the living example that overcoming was possible, even in the face of the impossible. Her journey had taught everyone that true strength lies in unity, in altruism, and in an unwavering belief in the human spirit. Winter still brought its challenges, but Anya's village was ready to face them, not with fear, but with the certainty that together they could forge any destiny. The legend of Anya, the ice flower who saved her people, began to be whispered by the icy winds, warming hearts and illuminating the path to a future that now seemed bright and full of promises.